This is a very obscure topic, but we wanted to talk a bit about it. And it's because we're at Cora, we're going to do some roasting. And on this specific coffee that I will link it on the description on the screen here, there is a light roast, which is your normal roasting style. And then there is an ultra light roast. So I wanted to just quickly talk about ultra light roasted coffee. And we have a roaster here who is actually roasting this type of coffee. So let's talk about, what is the difference between an ultra light roast and a normal light roast. And, we can also talk about brewing and what kind of that's been like. So yeah, it's a very obscure topic, but I think you guys will be interested in hearing about it.
I almost think there's not one pure definition of it.
I mean, do we start from medium?
Okay, let's talk about roast styles real quick.
Right, because the nuance really, even some people think medium is different from what you would think. Like your mediums are probably someone's medium lights, I would think.
True, yeah. The light and medium territory is very ambiguous.
Right.
I think dark roast is driven by second crack, at least touching second crack. So there's a physical marker, right? But light and medium are well past first crack, and then after that point, it's a continuous spectrum of flavor changes.
Right.
It's not really distinct changes. So yeah, it's tough. You can talk about it in terms of angstrom,
yeah, but we don't.
color
Not
measurement,
everyone.
but then
No one's gonna actually really know what that looks like.
And even that's not super accurate either. Some beans are just naturally darker if they're honey processed versus washed. So for us, light is already probably way more light than most other American roasters. Basically zero influence from the roast. So pretty maximum clarity, but then balancing whatever attributes are remaining for that coffee well, still having some sweetness, still having some vibrancy, still having a little bit of any inherent body that coffee had. And then ultralight is sort of screw body, screw sweetness or vibrancy.
Not screw. It was no priority, right? Because you still want you don't want a bad mouthfeel in your coffee. That comes from a bad roast or bad green.
Yeah, but I feel it's more just tell me what the green has, and that's it. Completely remove yourself as a roaster as much as possible. Touch first crack and then you're done usually.
Yeah. If I could compare the same coffee between light and ultralight, at least from our standpoint, is the ultralight will have more florality. That's you're really pushing for florality rather than just acidity.
Yep.
Because you're already getting so much acidity from a regular light, but once you're pushing to ultralight, it's more about aromas and florality in the coffee. That's what I would categorize.
Yeah, all the organic compounds that typically disappear super quick after first crack, that's what you're trying to preserve in an ultralight as much as possible. So in some sense, an ultralight is more well defined than a light, because you're basically playing very tight around when when your first crack would occur.
Just for the record, the light at Moonwake is I think is lighter than what a lot of nerds would consider American light. I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Is it harder to roast ultralight versus not roast normal development or your normal development?
So this is only our second coffee that we're having on an ultralight option. I would say for the first coffee, it was actually easier to do ultralight because
that was the green carrying it.
That was just the green was very flexible, and then you just basically needed to touch first crack, and that was it. So you didn't need to really explore too much around. You have to get the curves dialed in before first crack, but for regular light roasts, you have more time and variables you need to play with. So it's almost harder to roast a light roast coffee, in my opinion.
And then you're roasting on Probat. Is that harder? Is it roaster influence there?
Yeah. If you're gonna get into ultralight as your main coffee style, probably don't use a Probat. That's my opinion. It's just it's way less convection. So you have usually more spread of development from the center of the bean to the outside. And what that means is it's tough if you want the whole thing to be very underdeveloped or undeveloped to have a big gradient, because then you have to roast the outside a bit more than you would ideally want just to get the center of the bean to be roasted enough. Yeah, I would much rather have a lot more convection and just an even bean. And it's just more forgiving too. You can push it a lot harder. You won't introduce roast defects as easily. Yeah.
I mean, evenness is a very key factor when you're pushing things.
The one nice aspect I would say you get from a Probat ultralight though is because there's like a little bit more conduction at the end, there's that little bit of like surface, I feel like, development. You do get like a tiny bit of sweetness. It's almost like you have your ultralight bean and then like somebody just sprinkled a tiny bit of like
Yeah, well, I
sugar
mean, that's
on
like
it.
Probat, right? Like the
Yeah.
Probat has that nice kick in sweetness.
Okay, you're roasting ultralight now, right?
Yep, first batch of the ultralight,
Okay.
like you say.
You can tell the people about what you're thinking when you're roasting it. Like, how is it different?
Yeah, we'll see when we get started, but I have a rough approximation of what I'm shooting for.
That coffee was smelling crazy, so I cannot wait to taste this in like 2 months.
Yeah. Maybe after 1 month you can start.
Maybe, yeah. So that's the thing with ultralights is like on paper, this is everything that probably checks the boxes for all you nerds out there. You're like, oh, I want max clarity. I want all these flavors. You just can't experience them until like a month out. I guess it makes it good for those of you with massive backlogs.
Exactly, yeah. If you have a good cue, then it works for
Yeah.
that. It does teach patience. For ultralight, what I'm thinking for this coffee is there's like this sparkly aspect. It's like somewhere in between like the acidity being sparkly and like some type of floral aspect being sparkly. Now for our regular light, that gets a little bit mixed in with some of the other like clean tropical fruits, and it ends up being just like a very like sweet type brew. So for the ultralight, I'm thinking like that's what we want to really prioritize maintaining and keeping separate. So I'm about to charge it. I'm going to charge it at a slightly lower temperature. What I'm going to do is extend the Maillard phase of this coffee a little bit more, try to make it even and not with a lot of velocity going into first crack, and then very, very minimal time after first crack, shooting for at least 4 degrees under where I would normally drop it.
With these types of roasts, I'm just like, man, I like these coffees so much, I just don't have the patience.
Yeah. Yeah, I think both styles are, equally good. I'm partial to the light roasts. I like things to be like tied together a bit more. But I don't think you can go wrong with this coffee. It has so much good quality that at any roast level, I think you're gonna love it.
Yeah, I mean, this coffee he's roasting, by the way, is actually very, very good. So stylistically, it's a different style of roast. Like, do you want max definition of every single thing existing by itself, or do you want it all tied together? I think you guys will pick this coffee up. I have no idea if any of it's going to be available by the time this video goes out.
Yeah,
but
I hope so. Yeah,
it's a great coffee. It really is a great coffee. But it also shows you that Harry has a really good taste, right?
Yeah, I mean, Harry turned us on to this coffee, so shout out to him. This is his sourcing ability at work right now.
Yeah. So, it does seem like people want more of this style, though. So, I don't know. Maybe you're going to need to really do this on every one of your Nova series.
I mean, we'll see. I definitely think there is like coffees that are better suited for this type of roasting and coffees that are not. I still tend to stick true to the tastes and let that guide me. But yeah, definitely there's going to be more options in the future, I think.
Yeah, and with these coffees, you can always grind them and let them sit out for 5 to 10 minutes before you actually start brewing, or you start brewing double bloom and all of that, and you'll get a lot of those flavors out there. It's just that they really start to open up weeks and weeks and weeks out, which is the big challenge with this ultra light stuff. Your roast is like, well, you're almost done, right? Or it's like that's how fast it is.
For this one?
For this one, yeah.
On the Probat, no.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
On the Probat, I like to draw it out a bit more because, with so much less convection, I want to make sure the center of the bean is still like developed enough. On a convection style roaster, on a Loring, I would be pushing this incredibly fast.
When I think about it, I'm like, yeah, I think Probat Ultralight is probably decent because there's that little bit of coloring at the end that kind of saves you or kind of makes the coffee less veggie tasting. I mean, a little bit less hay-like versus like an ultralight on a Loring. It might be a little too weird taste.
It
Dude,
should
you
be.
can smell it.
It should
right
be.
now.
Yeah,
That's
like midway through like Maillard right now.
wow.
Yeah,
This coffee has so much potential. It's crazy.
it is. It's truly like exceptional.
Thank you for Ryan.
Is it a 90 plus?
I would probably score this like an 89, around there. It's above an 88.
But does the score go up because it's ultralight, or does it go down?
That's a whole other video we got to do, which is like, what is the cupping protocol you should use for ultralights? Because I can't cup these anymore. Like it doesn't extract enough that it's like I can't even evaluate it fairly.
So how are you writing the flavor notes on your bags now for these?
I write it for light.
Just pick up the florals more.
Yeah.
You're in the ultralight.
Instead of writing florals, you write intoxicating florals. Get this technology right here. Look at that. That's some wheatgrass right there. That's so light.
It doesn't smell like roasted coffee.
I can't really smell the roast on that at all.
You're definitely not going to get roast. Yeah, we'll see how this turns out. I'm pretty happy with the curve. It had a good crack, and the temperature is about 4 degrees less, and the development time is very short, but not too short. I feel like this one, there is like a limit to how far you can push it.
What about roast time on your light versus ultralight? What's the difference?
The development time is the thing that's going to matter here. The time leading up to that is going to be about 8 minutes 30, and then I think I'm going to push it a little faster for the ultralight, give it more momentum. But development time is going to be just under 50 seconds for the light roast, and for this one, it's going to be about 18 seconds.
Yeah, so significantly less developed.
Yeah, significantly less.
And that means more time you need to wait before you actually brew it.
Yeah.
That is light.
Yeah, this is a natural process, so it's going to have more of that like mottled coloring, and it's going to be darker in general on a surface appearance. But if you were to compare like the ground color, you're going to see that it's pretty light.
Usually when you roast coffee, there's like that smell, roasted coffee smell. I don't even smell it.
Yeah, you don't smell it.
Yeah, the fun part about ultralights is trying to pick out Quakers now. Like, what's a Quaker?
It's all of them are.
Like landrace, so you're going to have some variety in there because of that, and you'll usually end up with a couple Quakers regardless. So we're still going to try to do our best to pick that out. These are also really tiny beans, so they tend to get caught in crevices sometimes. So there might be like 1 or 2 that got stuck somewhere in the probat and got charred. So we definitely want to pick those out as well. More concerned about like these, like beans that get stuck, and get like overly roasted.
I can't even tell if this is
like, that's fine. I think that's like within range.
Yeah. So what is a Quaker and what is roasted coffee? Or maybe you could say none of this is roasted.
Man, this is hard.
Yeah. But you're going to want to look for like these, like straight obvious. And then like the tipping is a dead giveaway too. Like the germination spots getting overly roasted. Right there.
Yeah. What is that?
That's just a green bean.
It's unroasted.
It just got caught somewhere and then just came out.
That's the roasting perspective. I guess let's talk a little bit about resting and also brewing ultralights. Because, for example, if you guys buy a coffee from like a Poland's Gold or the Picky Chemist or the Moonwake Ultralight, you'll find out that these coffees are kind of finicky in terms of brewing, resting. Oftentimes I see these ultralight coffees, people will brew them and they'll be like, oh, it tastes like a weekly brewed tea or something along those lines. And then people end up thinking like, hey, how come all these coffees stylistically taste the same? It might just be because of resting or how you're brewing. So let's talk a little bit more about that.
The lowest applicable thing to do is like grind finer, you're going to push extraction, go hotter because they're less soluble now. But then it's weird because I've heard people go cooler. So I'm like, I think it becomes like, it's like, there's all the stuff that you fundamentally learn about brewing coffees and like, how to dial for light, how to dial for medium. And then you kind of go into ultralight and then you might actually see things be turned around. I still struggle with brewing ultralights on my own just because it's more like case by case brewing issues.
Like bean specific.
Yeah, bean specific parameters are really doing well.
Because like the other thing too is some roasters, like in a Poland's Gold, they will roast all of these coffees in that style. I mean, yes, plus or minus 5 to 10% variance in terms of like how developed a coffee is, at least when you are brewing it. But you end up seeing like certain green just cannot handle that roasting style, and you need to handle brewing that differently. The thing that I think we should talk about, and maybe we should make a video on this with maybe this coffee, is resting time with ultralight coffees. I think resting is a huge challenge or a thing people are very mystified with ultralight, because you traditionally think, okay, 2 to 3 weeks, done. But then you have roasters like a Poland's Gold, your ultralight, don't even touch this thing for 45 days, right? A whole entire month. Your roast, I found it stabilized after about a month and a half. It didn't open up until a month and a half, and then it starts to really stabilize. So like you find some, American light roasters like Say, which is lighter than American Light. It's like it kind of stabilizes and then it drops off. That's the experience that I find with a lot of ultralights, but it's like an additional 3 weeks than your normal, like, oh, I'm going to wait 2 weeks. I don't know. What's your experience been like there?
Again, I think it's super highly bean specific. For our first ultralight, like the Hacienda Cope, it is exactly what you described. Like a month, you could start drinking it if you extract enough, but month and a half, 2 months, like it just really stabilized. And I still have some that I've randomly opened like after 5-6 months and brewed, how I did back then.
For some reason. Yeah, and it tastes even better.
Maybe it's at least just as good.
It's just like so
incredible.
Unknown, right? Like, like when with like all these like our normal light stuff, it's like you can kind of see where that curve is.
Right.
It's like
it's like predictable.
it's a lot more predictable.
You're kind of letting the green carry everything, just like everything else. It's like if your green has that level of quality or like the structure is a certain way, then it can hold up. But yeah, to me, it's a challenge. It's like a fun challenge. Is how I view ultralights. It's like you have your base experience is maybe, at least for me, like lower because I'm not as skilled. But then like you hit a perfect brew and like the highs are just like way better than the light version. So that's kind of like my experience with an ultralight. It really like tests your patience, but also your like brewing skills.
I still think it also tests your ability to taste. Sometimes I don't know. Like I'm like, this tastes like the other underdeveloped, or like not underdeveloped, but like other ultralight. They all start tasting the same.
They taste like
They all-
lightly brewed tea.
And then it's like, I think training for underdeveloped is also kind of interesting too, because like you don't really like the notes are like vegetal or hay, or most like not even vegetal most of the time. It's like if it's not rested enough for an ultralight, it's just like mildly like hay, and it's like very undertoned. It just tastes like the coffee hasn't opened up. There's like something hidden, which is hard to like kind of notice, right? Like how do I tell that my coffee's rested enough?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, that's what I look out for.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's like an oats type taste.
Yeah, but it's so subtle that like
It is. And what I find too is like you drink enough ultralights, you kind of start like filtering out like the taste of that. And, like,
you're like, oh,
you,
it's
like,
good again.
You look past it. Yeah, but then it's if you take somebody who's just entering the world, it's like shocking that oat and hay flavor.
Yeah,
But that's the main thing that disappears over time, right? Like
yeah.
like
It's
once-
there because it's still rusting, basically.
Yeah.
Usually.
Do you guys find these coffees take longer to stale? For example, like a Poland's Gold, I find some like 6 months later, and I'm like, this should be old. I should get some of that old taste in it. But it feels like some of these ultralights, it's less. It's like, yes, you can taste oldness and you can taste some of that like cardboardiness, but it feels less at times with these coffees roasted this way.
Yeah, I mean, I think it. I don't know. I wish
we just
had
never
more-
had one where it's stale, so we don't know yet. You know, like
It can definitely get stale. Like I've had one where I had a sample bag and like I didn't seal it properly, so it was just exposed to oxygen
Yeah.
the whole time, and then that definitely tasted
Yeah.
stale, even though it was an ultralight.
yeah, but like can a properly stored, or like not properly because that'd be like at least can it be in a hermetic seal and not really stale at some for a long time, right? Because of course, if you just have it open to the air, it's gonna definitely stale. But if it's in a sealed bag, not vacuumed in the freezer, but like sitting on my counter for 8 months, we've never tried a ultralight at that point, right?
I mean, maybe one of you guys has tried that experiment, but one thing that I'm kind of interested in is like, if you do expose some of this ultralight stuff to the air, even though you're not supposed to do that normally with coffee, can you expedite the resting? Like, the resting time. Like theoretically, you should be able to, but then it might introduce some of that staling faster. That's like my guess there.
Yeah, but those are kind of our thoughts on ultralight roasted coffee. I mean, we luckily were able to actually get some of it roasted. Really curious about what you guys think. I know a lot of people drink this style of coffee, so I think it's very divisive, like how to roast it, how to taste it, and how to brew it. So yeah, but at least this is a coffee that is available for sale or might be sold out by the time this video goes out. But it's a very interesting thing. We can talk more about ultralight roasted coffee if you guys want to see that. All right. Thanks everyone for watching. Bye.